Good evening, and welcome to the Hero's Breath podcast. I am your effervescent host, Matthew Huddle.
And Tom Jasinski.
The recording date is Tuesday, October 30th, 2018. This is episode 4, and today we're going to be talking about the stage of the hero's journey, supernatural aid, meeting the mentor. I want to say thank you to our lovely sponsors, the Phi Center,
where we run the mind program, as well as acupuncture, physical therapy, and a range of other great services. We're pretty much trying to focus on a very holistic, integrative approach towards health, especially mental health, mental development, really, if anything, optimizing performance, you name it.
A little preface for today's episode. I started writing my notes heading in one direction and ended up being taken in another.
As is usually the case. It's almost always through the act of writing that you develop your ideas.
That's
so
how you
much
think it
more
through.
accurately.
Dr. Peterson talks about that's why he has the self-authoring program.
Oh, dude, in college, the religion program that we were in, they focused almost entirely on writing or in developing your skills as a writer, as a researcher. Having an idea of where you're going. But then once you get into the act of writing itself, there's certain processes that seem to just turn on.
It's different parts of your brain. I was going to talk about this episode, my mentors and your mentors and how we can find mentors in our real world daily life. In so writing, I found that I ended up talking more about the abstraction, about the archetype of the mentor and what an archetype is. So first things first, I'm just going to blurt out the categorizations of the aid and the mentor, how those look in cinema and literature. Then we're going to talk more about what the archetype of the mentor is, and then we're going to go into it from there. Supernatural aid is typically thought of as an object, and that can be either a tool or knowledge itself, because you think of the tool as a material object, a sword, a hammer, or something, or it could be a piece of knowledge, information, which is kind of like the ephemeral aspect of the aid itself. If a physical object is yin, knowledge is yang. And these can also be either found or given or gifted. Then the aid is either going to be consistent throughout the hero's journey or it's going to be progressive. You start with one object or piece of knowledge and it leads to the next, and then that leads to the next. And sometimes you drop the first one or the second one, and
you see this throughout video games.
I wasn't even thinking of that, but that's good. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this.
And then, upgrade. You leave the
first sword.
Yeah, you got this bigger sword. You got more power behind it.
More mana slots.
Yeah, you got more XP, so now you can actually handle a bigger weapon. That's another thing. Right. That's another component to this. I think there's also a point where we're gifted or given these objects or this knowledge when we're actually ready for it.
I didn't even get to that part when I was writing this stuff. I didn't even get to that readiness part because that's like a whole podcast by itself.
Yeah.
So we're going to put that into round 3, meeting the mentor. It's considered differently depending on the story you're reading. And again, this applies to your life. Sometimes you may find something that comes into your life that helps you, or you might find someone that comes into your life that helps you. So when you have a mentor, this person is either going to supplement the object or come in place of one. This person will initiate your journey or remain throughout the journey. And that person can then remain physically or in spirit. So objects as aid, my personal favorite, aren't just like the obvious things like, the lightsaber that Obi-Wan gives Luke. It's the little things, the little sometimes innocuous objects, the Mockingjay pin.
Yeah, this is an interesting
we mentioned
one
that in the first one,
Like when you first pointed it out.
It put her in contact with more people. Another one that's like right off the top of my head is the doubloon in the Goonies that Mikey finds behind the frame. It played a part throughout the whole journey, several points throughout the journey. That thing was the key to moving them along. Sometimes, though, the object is more abstract. Like I said, knowledge is considered the yang version of it. So you can be talking about a set of skills that a hero just so happens to have. I think the highly underrated film Tron Legacy beautifully puts that into frame. Sam, who begins his hero's journey when he gets on the grid, before he even started that point, he was already an expert hacker. He was a thrill seeker, an adrenaline junkie, so he had physical art skills. He could skydive and ride motorcycles and all the stuff that would come into play later on the grid. He used every one of those skills that they kind of framed up in the beginning of the film before he even got there. You or me, we wouldn't have made it that far in that story, but Sam had all the skills when he went into it.
To bring us back to that first point, you're gifted, you're given when you're ready.
Tom's determined to bring this one into this podcast now.
I have to. Man, every single day of our lives, right, we're racking up XP points through all the things we're doing. So when that opportunity arrives, when that object arrives, when that mentor arrives, when whatever it is that is going to push us forward in the direction we need to be going in, we're ready for it.
Talking about like found or gifted. Mikey found the doubloon. Katniss was gifted the Mockingjay pin. And that's really the only two ways you can get your aid. Knowledge can be passed on or gifted to the hero, was when Obi-Wan was training Luke, or it can be discovered through life lessons, again, such as how Sam, he spent his whole life being an adrenaline junkie, so he gained all these skills before he even got to the hero's journey. And now the object can be consistent, just like King Arthur's sword, Excalibur, or Captain America's vibranium shield, and in those cases, those objects became associated with the character. They became icons unto themselves. The other times they're progressive. And I was thinking of Hercules and his 12 labors. The first labor was to slay the Nemean lion. The lion had this impenetrable hide that arrows couldn't penetrate, or swords or anything. He eventually slays the lion, chokes it, I think, or beats it or something like that. And he skins the hide and wears it. And without that hide, you know he would not have made it through the other 11 labors. It protects him throughout the journey. So that was the first labor, but it got him through the next. Now, when we're talking about the mentors, they can appear with the aid or not. In the recent adaptation of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, again, I think a highly underrated film, Balthazar gives Dave a ring, which allows him to channel magic. Without the ring, he couldn't channel magic, but he couldn't learn magic without the ring, and he couldn't learn without the mentor. So in this case, the object and the mentor are all tied together. Whereas in The Matrix, Neo received no object from Morpheus. He just received the knowledge as the object. You know, Neo may have had all those gifts, but Morpheus had to come along to initiate him, and then of course remain with him. The mentor can initiate the hero, or can be with them. But in The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf dies. Halfway through the first part of the story, Sam and Frodo had to make their way to Mount Doom on their own. Obi-Wan, it could be said, stayed with Luke throughout the entire story arc, because he stayed with him in spirit. You don't necessarily have to have the mentor stay in physical form or even in spirit form, but also just in memory. Kill Bill is a great example of that. How the bride kept flashing back to her training. In our modern world, we're not necessarily going to get a gnarly doubloon or a special sword. I think talking about objects is not as important to our discussion for this podcast, but we first have to talk about what the mentor actually is when they come into our lives, whether they initiate, whether they remain, or whether they're just there for a time, or whatever it is. You and I are both adherents to Campbell, who's an adherent to Jung, who developed the terminology for archetypes. Why don't you tell our lovely audience exactly what archetypes are so I can stop talking?
Basically, archetypes are these universal, I want to call them themes, and they take a form in our collective unconsciousness, consciousness. Basically, it's an orientation point, what we all know to be a mentor. Every single culture will have figures, again, objects and situations that we collectively can identify. A great way of looking at an archetype is you can take essentially any individual coming from any place, present them with a story, and they can identify themes, they can identify individuals, they can identify universal things. An archetype is essentially that. It almost takes on all these different forms, whether they're physical or ephemeral, a memory, an individual, a thing. We can still nevertheless universally identify these things. Okay, that is a mentor, that is this is that.
That's the hero, that's the king, and everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These archetypes essentially are, again, something that are just endemic to the human spirit. What Jung found was that we all collectively share some of these things, and this is what Campbell eventually built upon. All these myths, all these stories, all of these legends have common structures, common themes, common individuals, common archetypes.
I was thinking of the way Deepak Chopra summarized archetypes as a seed in consciousness. It gets planted in the mind, it starts to sprout, and as it sprouts, the patterning forces create the situations, circumstances, and relationships for the unfolding of the story. And when we're looking at film and literature, that's one thing, you know, okay, somebody created this. And I'm going to jump way ahead in the discussion. When you start seeing this and applying this into your own life, it's fucking crazy how much this story of your life starts to unfold when you put it into this context. When you start seeing the archetypes in your own journey, you sit there and go, who the fuck is writing this?
And it's beautifully put, to see it in the consciousness, because all these different things, like, we can almost intuitively identify them. We can identify them in things where reading, watching doesn't matter, but we can, more importantly, as you just pointed out, identify them in our own lives if we keep our eyes and ears open.
The whole reason you and I got started doing this is because I came in for the Mind program. and we got talking, became friends, and you had the experience and appreciation for podcasting, and I know that I need to, especially when I listen to Gary Vee. I'll be like, yeah, shit, I got to do a podcast, but so much work, and I don't really know the world, and you do, but I have the brand, and I have the focus on that, so it's like, it was perfect for the two of us to get together. How did that happen? I knew Tay, and Tay's like, hey, you're screwed up. I want to put you on the Mind program. And I'm like, all right, cool.
And so going back to what we were talking about earlier, everything you and I have both gone through in our lives, every single experience, every single piece of knowledge that we have gained, all the XP points that we have racked up, that set us up for what it is we're doing right now.
Because it wouldn't be ready. If I was more severely depressed, I might have turned Tay's offer down. Ask any person, no matter what form of depression they get. When you get low enough, you don't even want anyone to help you out. Right. But I was at that point in my journey where I was just tired of being in the fucking underworld. I wanted out. And when the supernatural aid, and that's the other thing, is supernatural aid doesn't necessarily have to be magic. They couldn't have surmounted this obstacle without the aid. That's what supernatural really means. It's outside the hero's current ability at that point in their journey.
We can have many mentors. This hero's journey, this myth, this cycle that we keep referencing and talking about, it's cyclic, and there's many cycles within cycles. So you can be in a more macro style hero's journey, but then the cycle plays itself out in different areas of your life, whether it's financial, spiritual, romantic, or otherwise. And then within that, there can be many different
It's like
occasions.
looking at an old clock.
So in this situation, in what you're describing, Tay was one of those potential mentors, and you were given an object, your supernatural gift that you were then able to use to catalyze a set of reactions.
And I'm not using hyperbole, folks, when I say that the Mind program has really been that for me. I'm jumping over mental and emotional hurdles. Like I said in the last podcast, I can't get depressed.
First time you said it, I worried that there was something
wrong with me.
Well,
I couldn't get that way. Like, things that would set me off normally. I don't mean like, I spilled my coffee on myself. I mean like shit that would really put me in an existential crisis. There's nowhere for it to go. Yeah. And right away I'm moving into solution. Like Tom was just saying, archetypes aren't just people, they're also things. Every culture that has seen a sword knows a sword is for war. But an axe is a tool you keep on the farm. A bow is for hunting. Knives are used for everything. But a sword, it's only used for one goddamn thing. Yeah. So that representation of what the sword is, it's power, it's authority, it's warfare. These archetypes, we're going to find them throughout our lives. And Jung himself, when he was developing the concept, first called them primordial images. And he said, and I quote, "These images must be thought of as lacking in solid content, hence as unconscious. They only acquire solidity, influence, and eventual consciousness in the encounter with empirical facts." So we channel the meaning of the archetypes through us, through our actions. For instance, we have Captain America's shield. It's this metal object, it has a specific shape. The second we see it, we know what it is, we know the story. Even if you know nothing about comics, somebody sees that icon and they think liberty and patriotism and the most good character a character could be. We think about all these ideals, and all it is a bunch of concentric circles around a star. But the second we see it, we know what we're looking at. And that's the power archetypes have. So we think about, can we really find something so powerful in our lives? And the answer is, as we've been talking about from our own experience, the answer is yes, you absolutely can. But more important than the object is the person. So how do you find the mentors in your lives? They're not just the physical people that come along and take you under their wing. They're not just the parent and the teacher and all the things that you think of. There's a whole other dimension to consider. Just like physical objects and knowledge are both two sides of the same coin, the yin and yang aspect. You have the physical mentors in your life.
And of course, you have the parents, you have your teachers, like those are very obvious examples, but it's also those people that you read about in the books you read about.
That's it.
And they can be fictional, non-fictional.
Oh, you're jumping ahead.
Nevertheless.
I'm just kidding. Go on. No, exactly. You're exactly right.
Both fictional and non-fictional.
Yeah.
Basically those who instilled certain values inside you, instilled certain knowledge inside you. Anyone who helped you progress on your path, fuck it, maybe you were reading poetry.
That's a good point. I was thinking of just flushed out characters, really solid, stable characters as being, mentors you can bounce off of. but I didn't think about the abstraction of the abstraction, which is poetry, which is the right hemisphere using the left hemisphere's shtick, words.
That's actually a funny one.
Now I stopped and go, wow, that was a poetic way of talking about poetry. If I have to... Good, Matt. Very good.
For you, man. It's nice to sometimes just do a little self-evaluation. Just to look back and see who has influenced you in your life and what has influenced you in your life.
Mostly in hindsight. Very rarely does somebody say, I'm going to be your mentor.
And some people do actively seek out mentors, and I think that's one of the next steps that we probably encourage people to do. First, assess who has been a mentor in your life. What has been a mentor in your life? See what has impacted you in the past and how that has affected you in the present. Try to really do an inventory of that, and then see where you are right now. See where you want to see yourself going, maybe an individual or a group of individuals.
Sometimes people get attached to mentors, and this is a big problem. This is something I know Ty Lopez has talked about before, is that you can get too attached to one person and everything they say, so when they fail to live up to your grandiose expectations of them, then all of a sudden you get reviled, and it might end up undoing all the work that you've done on yourself, because really the mentor can't do the work for you. As Morpheus said to Neo, I can only show you the door, you're the one that has to walk through it. You have to make that choice. And that word, that C word, is going to keep coming around and around and around in this podcast, because this is the absolute hard truth, is everything always comes down to the choices you make. I can't tell you how many times I've encountered someone who was offering me knowledge and helping me in a way, and then somebody else who I also respected said, oh, watch out for that person. I can think of one case in particular from not that long ago, and not just like this vague kind of, oh, I got bad vibes off them, like real, like this happened to me with this person.
It's very concrete.
Very concrete, but still subjective. At this point, I had to stop. I go, I respect them both, but I've seen no reason to abandon one over the other. Managed to keep them both in their place. I was closer with the first one anyway. You have to keep making these choices and keep reevaluating these choices. And as you constantly say, question, question, question.
You gotta question it. You gotta really be just smart about it. Here's the thing about mentors is, they can be temporary. And maybe they just serve a function for a period of your life, for a period of time in your life. Think of this idea of the mentor as not even so much always a person, as much as it's a function.
Well, they're channeling the archetype.
A failed relationship is a form that this idea of the mentor can take. Serve the purpose, a function. Perhaps you took a lot out of it. Maybe you learned a lot of lessons. Maybe you did a lot of internal development as a result of it, being with that individual. Then that eventually saw its end, because maybe it just no longer served the purpose. Or maybe no longer served you the way it needed to.
Exactly.
A relationship, again, could also be a friendship, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, this is where we get more into the abstraction. Thousands of years, humans have told stories, and this wasn't just to entertain. This was to explain, to analyze and understand the tangible aspects of existence, like how the mountains got their forms and how, which god was responsible for lightning and thunder, and the more abstract forces of reality. And our ancestors devised these tales to inspire and to teach younger generations, but not just to keep them in line, as a lot of really, really nasty nihilistic people like to think, but that with that moral foundation, that next generation could go on to build a better society based on that foundation. Which is why I grumble at a lot of this modernist and postmodernist thought, is that they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They want to change a lot of things, which is great. You have to make change, and sometimes change is destructive.
In both the macro and micro sense. On macro level, what they're doing is they're questioning current order. Thing is, like you said, you gotta be smart about it. You gotta be selective about it. You can't just, like you said, throw the baby out with bathwater. It's not a complete overhaul. You gotta be inquisitive. You gotta question. But you also have to know where there's value in some of the things that are already in place,
As Jordan Peterson said, our ancestors gave us a great gift. They worked through a lot of the complicated issues. And if you read 12 Rules, or if you listen to any of his lectures or podcasts, you see how he really breaks down the things that you and I all take for granted. The suppositions our ancestors had to work with, like, what is good. Like his first debate with Sam Harris, like 3 hours, and they didn't get anywhere because they couldn't even figure out what the term, what was it, good or moral or something like that. They had to figure truth. Truth. They had to figure out what the fuck truth meant. It's for those who can't see, Tom looks pained right now. But that's what our ancestors gave us, is these lessons that we can build on. So from there, we develop our own understanding based on, so we looking at Campbell's work.
And just to go on a slight little rant, just because it's been on my mind lately, we have this funny sense nowadays that every single institution is somehow inherently bad in that it is an institution. This is mistaken it for an absolute, and what I mean by that is so often the case. Like, we forget that certain things serve a function. We get too caught up in the idea of the thing and people arguing over the thing itself. Respect the fact that it's serving a function. It didn't arise out of nothing. Something that was built upon failure and failure and failure, and we're constantly tweaking, but it doesn't make the thing inherently bad. Marriage is one of those institutions. Governments, religions. Now, are there many problems with each and every one of those things that I just mentioned? Absolutely.
Right.
You know, like, that's why we constantly see in headlines all of these fucking issues that we keep having.
Yeah.
Whether they be political, religious, what you name it. And there are many things that aren't perfect and that we have to continually work on tweaking, but it doesn't make the thing in and of itself bad.
A lot of that's going to come back to choice in terms of where we choose to put our perspective. The president's a great example right now. You take two people with two different sets of views. One person who does like maybe a little bit more research before they share something on social media, and then you have somebody who only watches mainstream news, only gets their news from their Twitter feed, their little bubble. They're not cross-checking, they're not fact-checking. So the president could do the same action, say the same things, and two people are going to view it completely differently. One's going to say this is good or bad based on the facts they've done and the president's pattern of behavior, and one's going to really be an NPC and just recite everything that they've been told on their media of choice.
Right.
Now, I kept this specifically vague because this can go in either direction in both cases.
And I
See?
appreciate you taking
That gets another pat on the back.
One is thinking critically. They're questioning. They're not simply engaging in their own biases. Willing to actually accept that they may have biases, and they're going to engage the other side. They're going to research the other side. They're going to understand all points of view. And that's really where we want to encourage people to be.
And that's really the role of the mentor, because if we break down, again, this is where we start jumping through categories. It's walking that line between order and chaos, as we were talking about last time. That's the hero's goal. That's what the hero has to do, be master of both worlds, walk that fine line. And it's the mentor's job to get the hero there. So when we're talking about these mentors that we may or may not have in our lives physically, and as you said before, and this is where I chastise you for jumping ahead, I'm going to read off a quote, and I want everybody to think about the face that appears when I read it. Some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check, but that is not what I have found. It is the small, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love. This is one of the most profound statements I think any human has ever uttered, but it wasn't uttered by a real person. It was uttered by Gandalf the Grey. It was written by Tolkien.
Yeah.
That's not the face we picture.
Exactly.
We see Gandalf.
Tolkien is able to translate that message through
the characters.
The character, the mentor, the archetype of the mentor.
Right. Going back to like a symbol like Captain America. He symbolizes the great American ideal, and what America is and what it stood for and how it's perceived has changed rapidly. And it changes from country to country or province to province, throughout the world. The writers of the Captain America story, it spanned decades, for generations really. No matter who was writing what came out of Steve Rogers' mouth was always kept in context. But Steve Rogers got the credit for those spoken, moral, upright words, and rightly so, because that was the character that was created to channel that. So you could think of, and this is why I brought those two characters up, and you could bring up Obi-Wan and Yoda. People quote Yoda all the time.
I fucking quote Yoda all the time.
I know you do. That's why I brought it up. Lucas isn't necessarily the greatest writer or the smartest man, but he went through Taoist, Shintoist, Buddhist, all this literature, all these great sayings, and that's how he wrote Yoda. He designed the character to channel our best minds, our most enlightened thinkers through this little Muppet. And we hear Oz's voice, we see that little Muppet in our heads when we think about trying to do something better, when we try to instill some wisdom. When these characters have been created, they take on a life of themselves, as we talked about last time. Again, these characters generate this archetypal pattern. So no matter who's doing the writing and who's doing the listening, we're still learning from people who are both as real and as fictional as we perceive them to be.
Wow. Wow. Any more?
No, I'm good, thanks.
That was very, very well put at the end, I have to say.
I really appreciate that, thank you. So I was channeling the archetype.
Yeah. Mentor will be here.
Well, that's because, you know what, not to go off on another tear, but I was thinking about this the other day. I'm going to admit my crazy. I was out in the woods. I was alone for long enough, and as far as I'm concerned, I had one of the gods of my pantheon with me. And it was something that you said that was akin to something I had learned a long time ago that I had kind of forgotten. And it was a speech by somebody, I forgot who, and I'm going to have to post it up. It's not about you. And this person was talking about it in terms of business. You know, we think of ourselves as the heroes of our own story, but in like the position you and I are in right now, as having this podcast and being a brand ambassadors for our own companies, we're the mentors for somebody else in the very literal sense. All the work that I try to do, that I know you try to do, we do on ourselves, but we're doing it to lead by example. And to take all this knowledge and everything we've learned and everything we've read, well, you've read more than I have, and to parse it out to people in a way that's easily digestible as possible, that somebody could sit on their train and listen to this on the way to work and sit down at their cubicle and think, you know, my life isn't so shitty. And if it is, I can fucking change it. All starts with the idea implanted. You can take Campbell's work and graft it onto your life and find that it fits perfectly. And if down the road we say something that absolutely is atrocious and horrible and these two guys went way too far, don't dump the knowledge you've taken from us up to that point.
It just goes right back to what we've been trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have choices to make.
Yeah.
Start actually questioning where we are. I'm sorry to say, but whatever you think is the best life you could be living, you're not living it. There's always room for improvement. Don't compare yourself to anyone else. Doesn't even matter how old you are.
Now, we want to talk about Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
I don't have a segue for that. He wrote, of course, Think and Grow Rich, The Master Key to Riches, The Law of Success. And this man had a shit ton of failures before he had his first success. When he was a teenager, him and I think his brother or his roommate had written this article, and one thing led to another. He ended up standing in front of Andrew Carnegie. For the whippersnappers who don't know, this is one of the world's first billionaires ever. He learned directly from Andrew Carnegie, and Andrew Carnegie gave him a challenge. After spending a weekend with him, he said, I'm going to write a series of introduction letters to some of the great industrialists at the time. We're talking the late 19th, early 20th century. So I'm going to introduce you to people. I want you to go and learn from them. And I want you to do this for me, and I'm not going to pay you. You're going to figure out your own way. And the guy was just fresh out of college or still in college. He had no money to his name. And he said, what do you say? Napoleon thought about it for less than 20 seconds. Because Andrew Carnegie was timing him. He had a stopwatch behind his back. And he went out and did it. And most people think, oh, you can't work for free. And my friends, I'll tell you from personal experience, you'd be surprised the wisdom and knowledge and aid you will get by working for free.
AKA, you're not working for free.
You're not. You're getting more than you're giving. So he interviewed Henry Ford, Charles Schwab, F.W. Woolworth, Theodore Roosevelt, and so many other great minds and thinkers, and literally learned at their feet. And despite this, he still had a shit ton of failures before he had any success.
Yeah. He was working for free, but not really.
Somehow he always found money to get
so
to the
much
next one.
value on the physical. So
Yeah.
going back to our discussion on the object, it doesn't always have to be physical. It's mental. He gained so much more value. You also pointed out he had all those failures, but guess what? Each and every single one of those served a function. Was instructive in some way.
The experience itself. Now we go a layer deeper, going into this philosophical onion. The experience itself. That's what builds, I think, the passion. Another one of those things that I found learning from my digital mentors, as I call them, Guy Lopez, Peter Sage, Dan Pena, Brian Rose, Gary Vee, listening to all these people, looking for the corollaries, looking for where it all comes together. There is no point in doing something strictly for the money to get you a house and a mansion, because you're still going to feel empty about it. I'm not saying don't work and hustle so that you can build something towards something else. That's one thing. You know, if it falls into your plan to go in a certain direction, fine. All these people who think, oh, you know, I'm going to be an Amazon seller. Okay. then what? Well, I'm going to make a shit ton of look at these graphs, look at these charts. I see these advertisements on my Instagram, my YouTube feed all the time. It's like, look at this, I'm standing in front of my computer at home, my underwear. Look at all these great sales I just made. This is my paycheck. And I'm like, who the fuck cares? I don't give a shit about selling tube socks on Amazon.
Where's the meaning in that?
And that's, again, what Peterson talks about. You have to find the intimation of meaning. You have to find where the chaos of uncertainty of, am I going to get my bills paid? Am I going to get evicted? Can I, feed my family? Can I feed myself? That chaos and the order of having that nice steady paycheck and the commission check and whatever comes in. I left a great network marketing company fairly early on in my journey a couple of years ago. I bartered my way in. Somebody in the company bought me in on her credit card, and I repaid her with massages. And then about 5-6 months later, I told her and I told my friend, who were kind of mentors to me in that respect, that I'm going to bow out because I was putting more money into the company than I was seeing. And this was because when I started, I had no vision for what I wanted to do. I just know I had to get out of my current situation. As I got the vision, I realized I can't just do this to make money. And I could have made a lot of money. It's called Market America, by the way, and people bash, say MLM this and Amway that, and what, you know what? A lot of people make a lot of money. It's not the system, it's not the company, it's you. I'm going to say that right now. The only reason you can is you. And I knew it was me. I knew that I could make money in Market America, but I'm not going to because I don't have the passion for just doing that. And I found other ways.
Mentors, those two that you just
No, they were. They absolutely were.
And you know what?
I should give Dave and Joanne a shout out right now because you guys definitely were mentors to me in that, in that period.
Because that situation didn't pan out the way
you're right.
You expected. What it did, she provided the object, whether it was an opportunity or the financial means.
Actually, it really all started with my friend David. David introduced me to Joanne, and it moved on from there.
You gained some insight, you gained some experience. You also gain clarity about where it is you actually want to go, because oftentimes these situations give us an opportunity, a chance to glance at and learn what it is we don't want, and that actually gives us more clarity about what it is we do want and where we should be going.
Sometimes when you're a little too close to a situation, you don't see it that way. But I told them that. I said, I learned a lot, and they were both very disappointed, of course. Mm-hmm. But I said, I gotta focus on my brand. They respected my decision. They were respectful. We're still Facebook friends and everything else. Big shout out to Market America. If anyone has no direction, they want to make some extra income, contact a Market America rep. This is not a paid sponsorship. It is a highly rated network marketing company, and you really can have a really good future in that if you want to go in that direction. So I'm just going to, that's how much I believe it. I'm not in it, and I still believe it could really help people. It wasn't for me, but yeah, you're right. I had to go through it to see it. I really think it's always hindsight. Very, very rarely do we call someone a mentor. We're like, oh, I've met this person. They're the mentor character in my life. You realize that more in hindsight. You realize that more if you're really sitting down analyzing it. And you go, who's a mentor in my life right now? You're not going to have a mentor until, as you said, you're ready, until you've already started to answer the call. And the mentor can bring you the call, like Obi-Wan did for Luke or Morpheus did for Neo. But like Neo and Luke, they both had that inkling to leave. So if you've answered the call and you're kind of moving in that direction, the mentor will appear.
To fucking give the corniest, choosiest, shittiest quote, when students ready. The teacher appeared. Because it's so true.
I think everybody knew that quote was going to show up at one point or another.
You were almost setting me up for it.
Loved it to you.
That call is always there. Being able to have just enough awareness to see that it's there. And then the moment we see it, we start toying with the idea of it. I mean, that's the whole fucking premise of The Secret, to be honest with you. You could get metaphysical with it. You can put all these intentions into your universe. It really works on a very concrete level.
Yes.
Because the moment we start to get a little clear about where it is we want to go, where that call is guiding us to, suddenly our eyes and ears are open to the people around us, to the stories around us, to the things going on in our environment and things we're reading, seeing. We are living in such a great age because, as you pointed out before, you have all these digital mentors. You can get online, you can start watching YouTube, you can do anything, and you will start to see that there is so much knowledge, insight, wisdom to be found in so many different places.
This happened to me again recently. I have an opportunity now to do cosplay. It's kind of come to me through my ex-wife, who has a geeky magazine. She's got an event coming up. She says, hey, I could use a Captain America. That's my boy. Really,
in case you guys haven't noticed.
That's the one I channel the most. But we're drawn to these archetypes. We'll get into that more later. So she said, hey, you want to do this? And that's like a whole specific world that I had been a part of years ago that I kind of fell away from, and she's kind of like drawing me back in. Why don't you come do this? You're really good at it. You're a true nerd. Well, why don't you come on back into the geekdom? And I said, okay, yeah, I'm down for it. And at the same time, it's also kind of re-inspired me to, not that I'm out of shape, I'm in great shape, but to like kind of take things up to another level, to kind of get maybe a little bigger and work on some more things about myself, work on some more things about my personality, to try to get more into that headspace. If you go to the website, heroesbreath.com, and you go to the tab at the top, My Tribe, you're going to see sponsors, you're going to see partners. Of course, Tom's Instagram is going to be listed on there. Solid Pilates, where I do Pilates, will be listed on there. And then you scroll down, you're going to see mentors. And I have links down there for the people who have mentored me personally, their websites, their social media, whatever they were willing to put up. And then you'll start to see the digital mentors. Jordan Peterson is of course on there, Ty Lopez, Gary Vee. As time goes on, I'm going to probably think and remember more. To anybody who's served a mentor role in my life, if you go and you're not there, please don't be insulted. It's contextual. It's not a matter of, oh, I thought I helped. It's more a matter of, in the context of, as I go through the journey and as I think about it, I'm going to put more and more of my mentors up. This is, again, reflective for you, the audience, to see how I've kind of categorized and put these mentors up, and you can see them. There's somewhat in the order that they have appeared. So this is something for you to look at and to think about it, reflect off of your own life. Who has been there throughout this time? And if you really, I mean, I'm sure you had a teacher or a parent or somebody, but if you can't think of somebody recently who has shifted your world, who has upset things, who has turned things, who has moved you in any significant way, hate to say, you haven't hit stage 2 or 3 yet, or you keep hitting that snooze button on stage 3.
Or you just don't have good self-awareness.
Wow, I never thought of that.
I don't think you can go through life and not have these people in your life or these situations in your life, not even given enough thought and reflection. Definitely, I encourage you to find some quiet time. Whether you want to journal and get these things on paper, the way we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, so you can start playing with these ideas.
Don't do it at 2 in the morning.
Oh, that's when my mind starts spinning. It's when I'm laying in bed
That's
and
everybody.
suddenly all that starts to bubble up.
Because you're finally relaxed. I recommend doing it during the day.
I can point to so many mentors. I can't tell you how many fucking mentors I have in the digital world through podcasting.
Why don't you shout them out? Aubrey Marcus, I know, is
Aubrey
one.
Marcus is such a great dude. He's the founder of the company On It. You know, he's got his own podcast. Kyle Kingsbury, he's got his podcast for On It as well. I consider myself a biohacker, finding ways to optimize health. Dave Asprey, man, Ben Greenfield, like these guys are like the big ones. I can't tell you how many people
They
I
need
found
mentors too.
through them. It's embarrassing, man. Like,
Yeah.
this guy is like fucking the Don Juan of podcasting. Yeah. He's been doing it for so long, and all the people he's had. Sometimes that's all it is a single sentence from a single individual, and that can change your worldview. That can change or shift something, or move
Slams
you, or
into
motivate you,
place.
or suddenly propel you.
As Tom has repeatedly said, his catchphrase of question and question and question and question. Look around your life, figure out where you are. And the reason we use literature and cinema is so that you have a template, you have an example. The reason my ex said, why don't you come play Captain America, is because it's not a fucking stretch for me.
These things give us context.
Figure out who gives you the most context. If you're a geek, nerd, whatever you want to categorize yourself as, it's easier, I think, for you in that respect if you fall into that mental track. You're always looking at these shows and movies that will give you this. If you're more into classical literature, whatever you're into, whatever you absorb it consciously. Go into it consciously. Look for the characters that you're drawn to. Some of them will be reflective. Some of them will be instructive. Look for who's instructive in your life, whether they are physical people, people from the past, people from the web, people in real life, fictional people who, as we've already said, can be really freaking real. Start questioning and start looking around and start taking that assessment of who your mentors are. And also, like for me, I got the Mind program. I found the ketogenic diet, this aid to help me along in my journey, get my mental health, my physical health in order. Think about some of the knowledge that you've been given or you've discovered that could be helping to move you along in your journey in ways you might not consider, and we hope that we have given you more understanding and more context in that.
These things just build on top of each other, and they propel us. They move us from one stage to the other. Constantly shift. There's going to be many supernatural objects that are going to come into your life. There's going to be many individuals, many mentors, many situations, many experiences. Just allow them to have their place. Thirdly, it's what you're ready for. If you don't take them, if you don't acknowledge them, then you're going to be stuck until you do.
And I know we've laid out a lot, so take a couple of notes, tack it on your mirror, tack it on your office. Think about it, mull it over, and above all else, folks, remember, you're the hero. From Matt
And Tom.
peace out.